I'm Ivar, the CTO and creator of Unleash. So originally I developed Unleash to simplify my own life as a developer. And it's incredibly gratifying to see that it's now being used by thousands of companies worldwide. On a personal note, I'm married and I'm a proud father of 2 boys, aged 4 and 7. Today we are privileged to have Mark Quigley with us. Mark is an engineering leader at Wayfair and will share insights on how they leverage feature flags and how they scale Unleash to meet their unique needs. Please note that this session is being recorded and a copy will be sent directly to your inbox. If you have any questions during Mark's presentation, feel free to ask them directly in the Q&A tab, and we will address them towards the end. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the session. And with that, I'm leaving it over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Ivar. So my name is Mark Quigley. I lead engineering effectiveness for Wayfair. I'm a developer, a dad, and often a gamer. And we have been using Unleashed for quite a while. So let's get into it. We're going to talk a little bit about who Wayfair is, just so you have some knowledge of us. We'll go through our use cases, challenges faced by us, and ultimately how we arrived at a solution. And as Ivar said, we'll be happy to do some Q&A at the end. I think that's a valuable piece of it. So hopefully we don't need an introduction, but here's Wayfair. We are an e-commerce platform focused exclusively on the home. We bring together an amazing supplier experience with a customer experience to facilitate shopping and fulfillment for everything home related. We're happy to be of service to our 22 million and growing customers. From a brand perspective, we have a number of brands that help us meet all of our customers where they're at in terms of specialty brands or specific looks and feels for their home. And of course, Wayfair is the brand that unifies all of the strata and how we deliver value to everybody. Okay, so what are our use cases? We started off needing to be able to deploy features, as everyone does, and those were requiring a deployment cycle in between every feature release. The engineering hours spent testing and certifying that every feature was production ready and good to go out were growing ever longer in time. And some of this was healthy in that we were doing automated testing and other forms of things to make sure that we were delivering that amazing customer experience that we want to. But some of this was starting to become, how do I make sure that this is so fully baked before it goes out? Because I can't release it partially. I can't do incremental work. I've got to sort of do at least a big bang at a feature level approach. So a very common solution is to reach for a feature flag system. So we built one, thinking how hard can this possibly be? And this was great at first. We could switch on and off features in production, allowing us to test them both incrementally or in smaller than 100% blast radiuses. The in-house tool was built around the PHP monolith we had at the time, and it was production deployment friendly. We could release stuff in the dark. We could do micro deployments. It really seemed to solve all of our problems. So why am I doing a webinar for Unleashed if our in-house thing solved every problem? Well, because it didn't, at least not for long. With our in-house solution, first off, it worked. And so we experienced rapid user growth on this system. All of our internal devs started using it. It caught on very quickly. We didn't have policies in place for how we would govern users, teams, projects. We had to start doing a lot of patches and a lot of updates to adapt to this level of growth and also the new feature demands. And between all of this, we started to get into scalability concerns and the maintenance overhead. Our house was starting to catch on fire a little bit here. So some of the challenges uniquely: unregulated access across multiple teams. Anybody could move in and create toggles, but worse yet, anybody could flip the state of a toggle. And so we didn't have naming standards, so we had a lot of confusion about, is this my toggle or somebody else's toggle? And sometimes people would flip it just to see, and the consequences were not always ideal. But even when it was clear, it was just prone to human mistakes and misconfigurations. As you can see, we had some people moving through an API system of ours, but we also had other folks directly interacting with the database under the hood to change the state of toggles or manipulate them. Initially, we also didn't have good enough switches and history. So we were not able to track changes. If something went wrong, it was hard to say, did this go wrong because of a deployment? Did it go wrong because of some other latent bug in the software? Is it an infrastructure issue? Or was it that somebody flipped a toggle? We didn't have that visibility. Additionally, all of this iteration and maintenance caused us to continually have to take the system into maintenance mode. Now, we were smart enough to build it so that maintenance mode just meant that you couldn't change the states of toggles. It didn't cause the activation strategy or state checking to be taken offline, but it still meant that there were lots of periods where feature propagation would take 40 minutes or longer. You would go to change the state of a toggle and you'd have to just wait forever. Now, if you've released a feature and it's not working as intended, you may need to turn it off much faster than 40 minutes from now. So that was causing us a fair amount of grief. And then also, as we moved beyond our PHP monolith, as we began to build an increasingly large number of microservices in Java, Python, .NET, Rust, etc., we found that we had to have a middleware for supporting more languages, more ecosystems, more clients. And that was an additional burden on the team attempting to do this. And then the maintenance overhead of keeping this all connected and connected well, especially when the connection paths were diverse. Again, it was becoming very, very difficult to keep the system up and running. So what did we do? Well, we flipped the most important flag we could. We went from our in-house system to Unleashed. We found out of the box and right away, it was scalable, highly performant, and resilient. And the nice part is it came with all the server-side and client-side SDKs that we could want, whether it's Python or Java on the server side, or React and even Android type clients on the client side. This immediately took a large maintenance burden off our hands as we were able to shift that all to the pre-built SDKs. And also, we were able to get a lot more nuanced with our activation strategies. So while we had things like percentage release and some sense of session stickiness, we were able to get even more in depth and satisfy a lot of user demand around that nuance with the activation strategies you can set up in Unleashed. They give us a lot more granular control over how we wanted to do a rollout from dark to full on. And we did that with the custom strategies and constraints that the system offers. And the last point here is especially important. We started to have flag types and tags. And in addition to user maintenance and teams and projects, we could start to really get our hands around what are all these toggles and what are they for? Who's using them? Are they out of date? Should they be removed? Or are they still in development? So we could look at a lot of different things. And that's helped us get our head and hands around what these toggles are used for and give us better control over that. So how did we do it? Well, first, we started back in a while ago with Unleashed. And initially our deployment was very simple. Unleashed server backed by Redis cache, and we would have all of our service pods connecting directly to the server for state checks. Now, this works pretty well actually, and this worked for us for quite a long time. All of the scalability problems we were seeing with our initial system, our homegrown system, were solved by this solution. But one of the things that we found is that we had to do a sort of one-size-fits-all strategy for how we were configuring Unleashed for our customers. Unleashed at this time offered a service called Proxy, which we were using to start to push some of this out closer to the edge and to make that closer to those users so they wouldn't have to do that one-size-fits-all. And right about the time we were talking about, boy, Proxy is not as much as we need it to be, Unleashed came along and released Unleashed Edge. And this was a huge boost for us. We switched everything over to Edge very quickly, and now we were able to put a state checking, activation strategy checking footprint much closer to our various pods. We were able to put it out where it was close to our compute, close to our use cases, and it's very highly performant, very powerful, horizontally scalable. It has its own caching solutions. And so this really allowed us to start to customize our different solutions. You may have noticed on an earlier slide, with over 20 million customers, we're going to demand a lot more from a feature flag system that's got customer facing work than with our suppliers. While we care deeply about our suppliers, there's a lot fewer of them, so we didn't need the same level of intensity there. Unleashed Edge allows us, operating off of a single Unleashed server, to start to do those kind of nuanced configurations. It was very helpful. And we're able to put a lot of traffic through to an Unleashed Edge server. Now, again, those SDKs are keeping the resiliency high because they are, once booted, keeping a local version of state. So even if the connection to Unleashed Edge is going down, you're still able to have all those applications stay running. You're just unable to change the state of a toggle. But with Edge being able to be horizontally scalable, fast restarts, that wasn't really a concern for us. And we think that in the event of a problem like that, we'd be able to recover very quickly. Now, the good news and the interesting news here, Unleashed Edge has been stable enough for us. We haven't had a chance to test that theory. It just doesn't go down. So I'll take that win and be thankful for it. And then I talked about, hey, some of our user bases are different, right? We need different configurations, different amounts of scaling, different memory sizes, et cetera, for different use cases. Unleashed Edge is allowing us to do that too. We can put different Edge servers out into different populations and drive requests off of them. And because we can put those at different scaling levels, we were able to dial in our optimization for all of our service use quite a bit. This allows us to put our extremely high traffic Edge server auto scaling and still have all of the, cache protection and other protection for even our lower usage areas. And then we were able to guardrail the server itself. So because Unleashed Edge is perpetually on and keeps a copy of that state, we can rate limit how much it hits that server and take some of the pressure off of those servers that we were experiencing that Proxy was helping us solve before, but now that Edge helps us solve. And so you can see that we can use all of the standard methodologies to control how much traffic is moving back to that server, and we can make sure those servers stay up and available at all times. Again, though, it's important to note, even if they were to go down, the application side is where the current state is held. And so the nice part is this system is resilient to any breaks or gaps along the way. I'm gonna move on here. So Unleashed Edge, what is our volume? Right now we're running 4 servers with a highly variable amount of Edge outside of those servers. And you can kind of see how we've scaled them. They're not amazingly large servers. They're fast and efficient to operate. And you can see that we're getting really good response times in the P95 category. We're getting what I would call good to great response times in the P99, but we think we can make those better. So we're doing some work on our end to further distribute this architecture, and we think we can get even those P99s down. So how much traffic are we serving? This is a typical busy day, so think not a typical day, but a typical sales event or something like that. And you can see 2 things about this. First off, at peak, we're running more than 20,000 requests per second. And also, our traffic tends to be relatively spiky. Turns out, not a lot of people are up at 2 a.m. shopping for home goods furniture, although we wish they were. Well, we wish they were shopping more. Maybe they should get some sleep. But that does create spikiness. So Unleashed is with Edge is helping us scale up and down to meet that demand as it occurs. and all the while maintaining that latency of less than 5 milliseconds and running efficiently, CPU and memory wise. So total cost of ownership. This is something that I think everybody cares about. We initially set out to build our own home system, thinking, again, how hard could this be? And that we could manage the efficiency and the cost of that system fairly well. What you can see here, though, is that it had a sharp ramp up as we were building it. And then even afterwards, there was a fairly steep linear ramp that aligned with usage, right? Unleashed itself, almost no ramp to implement and build out. And the ramp on usage is more gentle than the ramp in our homegrown system. The big deal for me, though, is the gap between these lines. Unleashed is 3 times more efficient from a cost perspective than our home-built system, and we expect that would have remained true for the rest of the time. So clearly a cost-valuable decision, as well as all the other benefits that we got. So what does Unleashed let us do? It lets us innovate with stability. We have over 400 projects on Unleashed, deploying features to production. We have more than 3,500 flags configured across our clusters. And in our production, we have 2,200 of them actively being used, various activation strategies, toggling on and off, that kind of thing. The gap between those two, of course, is all of the work we have in our dev environments and experimental areas. And our teams are creating about 50 new flags every month, with all of the ability to segregate teams, projects, give different rights to different folks, and all of that. The nice part is we've also been able to distribute all of that work out. So as people go to create new flags, our centralized platform team, we don't have to be involved in that process, which has really freed up those teams to utilize this feature and innovate even more quickly. Ultimately, these flags are helping us build faster and still release safely so that we have that risk profile flexibility to continue to really drive forward things quickly. We want to make sure that our teams are spending as much of their time possible building features that our customers absolutely love. And this is one of the ways that we help them do that. We take the risk out of incrementally building those, testing them, and deploying them. That is it for me. And I guess I went a little fast because it went by too fast, but that's extra time for questions. So
it was very easy to follow. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your learnings. It's actually quite interesting because it's quite common for us. We see this all the time, that companies have built some kind of homegrown solution in one shape or another, and when they start engaging with us is typically when it gets out of hand. It's just becomes too much work. So obviously, my takeaway, my read on that is it's actually quite fantastic. That's something that can be core business for us. We should definitely not be core business for you guys. It should be supporting you guys in focusing on how can you build the best shopping experience for your customers. And I think it's a fantastic kind of collaboration that we have been able to establish here.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So we have actually received some questions from the audience. So I will just start with the first one. So Mark, what keeps you up at night then?
That's a good question. I sleep pretty well, to be honest. But if anything were to keep me up, it's the idea that, you know, as we build out the platform for all of Wayfair, we're sort of underneath everything that the customer, a supplier, any of our business partners is going to experience. So when things go wrong for us, they tend to go wrong fairly broadly across the organization. The reason I sleep well is because I'm fairly confident in solutions like Unleash, and of course we've got all our monitoring and alerting. I'll get paged. If it weren't for that, though, that would keep me up. The idea that if we break something, it breaks for a lot of different groups. And I say if we break something, but the reality is, if you look at a lot of failures, they don't come from you know, somebody up in the middle of the night making a change. They often come from something else. A dependency went offline for some reason, or, you know, there were bandwidth or connectivity issues, or some random esoteric event. One of the things that we look for in all of our solutions is how resilient are they going to be to those things that just happen that are beyond our control?
Absolutely. That's a good thing to look out for. And unfortunately, you typically don't spot them before it's too late, but then good observability will take you a long way, at least if you're able to be proactive and obviously detect things that can blow up before they blow up. Obviously, that is the perfect spot, I guess. So you have thousands of developers on the Unleash platform.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it for you guys to drive standardization among the teams and how they use Unleash? Is that important, or are you kind of more in that they should be able to use it however they like?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting trade-off, right? So if you take both extremes, where we tell them exactly how they have to use it, then what we get is a really good understanding of what everything in the system is doing. But the challenge is we really limit the innovation, right? So for us, getting features that our customers care about out is the most important thing, and that requires that we remain flexible and innovative. And to do that, we take our hands off the steering wheel a lot. So teams are going to use tools like Unleashed in ways that suit them best. But what we want to do is not lose that perspective altogether, because then that brings us kind of the chaos that caused us to look for Unleashed in the beginning. So
Exactly.
a lot of the features like flag tagging has been really helpful. You know, what are these flags for? The types have been helpful. Is this a long-term feature flag, or is this a short-term implementation flag? That's really helped us maintain that balance between letting teams use it as they need to and stay innovative, and still have some awareness and recognition of what the things in the system are doing.
Exactly, and you touched upon another thing that is very dear to my heart, because with all tools, there is always a trade-off. And for me, feature flags, the trade-off is if you allow too many of them to stick around for too long, they represent quite significant technical debt. One thing is the flag themselves, like you have to navigate, you have to understand, is this still being used? But the other part is that it's actually protecting unused code potentially in your code base. That is also can be a massive amount of unvalidated code paths that might not even work anymore after a few years. So how do you guys think about technical debt and make sure that you actually use this tool responsibility or this ability responsibility?
Yeah, I think the best example I have of that is, you know, if you use a feature flag to say, move from one database to another. And the worst part is, eventually what's going to happen is that old database is going to be archived and taken offline. Well, so should that flag ever be reversed, now your code is trying to talk to a database that no longer exists. So there's a critical failure, right? So you're dead on that these are tech debt that we need to pay attention to. And when we don't know what they are, we don't know who owns them, we don't know what application that is using them, that tech debt is impossible to get our hands around, which is why in our old system, we had thousands of flags that were still there. We were pretty sure that they were dead, but we couldn't safely remove them. This is where the types and the tags are very useful, because we can understand what application needs these flags, and we can go and say, hey, these maybe are past their lifespan. But actually, Unleashed has features that will do that. They'll become stale after a while, and it'll say, hey, this is a stale flag. You should go address that. And because we can surface that directly to teams, that's been very helpful on shifting left and letting them see that they've got some of those risks and that they should go work on it. And it's helped us keep up with that life cycle. I think there's always room for improvement, and that's one of the areas we're still trying to get better at. But definitely it's better than it was.
Yeah, and this is so important to us that we even ourselves have an initiative now. We are investing more in better modeling the feature lifecycle, so that we can be even smarter of identifying the stale flags, because currently we use time, and time is good. We are using data we collected across a lot of customers to set the great defaults for the timing. But then again, we can also use the behavior, the usage. We do observe a lot of things, and we're having a life cycle project where we want to make it even easier for customers like yourself to deal with the downside of feature flags, basically, to make sure that you get a healthy balance of getting the benefits, but not all the downsides, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just to be, the benefit to innovation far weighs out these downsides, right? But
absolutely.
more help we can get from you.
I'm more thinking the long-term consequence. Like on the short term, I'm not worried, but we see that it's a lot easier for customers to add flags than to remove them. Kind of, you have to actually invest time in removing the code path as well, basically. But let's move on. There are more questions. So one of the questions that come in here is, can you describe the mission and size of your team and how they manage to influence the adoption for the other teams in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission with engineering effectiveness is to help every other team and engineer at Wayfair be faster, better, and happier. We want to be able to affect change lead time, deploy velocity, make those much better, faster. We want to reduce our change failure rate and shorten our MTTR. That's how we be better. And then, of course, we want to make that not painful on all of our engineers. And so that's where happier comes in. And we really do see, we measure developer happiness, and we see it go up when they have access to tools like Unleashed. They say, hey, that thing that used to keep them up at night, worrying about how would they recover from a failure, now doesn't, because they know they have flags and the ability to toggle them on and off to control some of that and to get their hands around it. My team size, like many, has varied over the last several years, but currently I've got a team working on this, so that's about 10 individuals. It's only taken a portion of my group to keep everything online and running, and in fact, it only takes a portion of that team. So when we talk about how hard is it to leverage Unleash, it's not. I used to have a full team dedicated to the old system, and now we're able to do that with part of a team. Adoption actually comes fairly easily for us in terms of devs wanting to use these solutions. Again, when you tell a team, hey, we've got a solution, you can turn stuff on and off at a moment's notice. That really gives them that safety that they need to deploy fast and well. They're going to take that. You don't have to sell that very hard. What was thwarting our adoption with the legacy system was back to that idea of Wayfair has a very diverse tech stack. Building the SDKs for every single environment, every single tech stack, every way that we could build software, it was just hard to keep up with that all. And so we had demand that we couldn't fulfill. Now those SDKs are ready for us. They just exist. So we're able to roll those out very quickly and I would say we have near universal adoption on Unleashed at this point.
Cool to hear. But what about the non-technical people in the room, the business executives? How would you describe the benefits for them using feature management?
Yeah, and for us, that's an interesting story. So we have product folks who are definitely in the system and can change the state or start to do the configuration of the system, and they play a role. At Wayfair, though, what we do is we partner our business units and our technical teams very closely. And so we don't have a need for people outside of engineering or product to manipulate toggle state. So we haven't tried that.
Cool. Does feature flags in Unleash support authorization restrictions?
I'm going to say yes. I think I could hear that question in a couple of different ways, but I'll start by saying baseline yes. It's definitely allowed us to create, whether we're on different servers or just teams within a single server, and also by project, you can very finely control who can do what, who can create, who can delete, who can change the state. But actually, maybe I'll hand that back to Ivar and say, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what exactly what you say. You can read the question differently. So if we talk about who can kind of change the configuration, yes, of course, Unleash has full RBAC support, and you can control who is allowed to change what in certain environments, per projects, all of that. If the question is more geared towards restricting access to features you're building, yes, you can use feature flags to do that as well. But then again, I think it's important also to stress that feature management is not a replacement for access control in your system. So I think what we see is it's good to explore where those boundaries are when you're building new capabilities that you're a bit uncertain about who should actually have access to this. But when you figure that out, our recommendation is always to move that into a fit for purpose kind of system that sounds more like a core business of your application, to care about who is allowed to do this or not. But okay, that could be at least those two ways I can read that question. So let's move on. So there is a question around the very specific questions around how you guys are using the edge instances, and the question is whether the Unleash edge is connected to a central Redis instance, or if each edge kind of clusters of edge is actually having their own Redis instance to communicate with.
Yeah, I'll say we are using Edge the way it came to us from Unleash. So we haven't done anything funky or weird. We haven't modified it. And so what we have is Edge is communicating to Unleash server. And that's all nicely pre-baked. So by just setting up Edge and telling it what its parent server is, it's going to start pulling and grabbing toggle state and making sure that it has the most latest, greatest version of that at any given time. And you can tweak that. You can change how often the polling schedule is and so on and so forth. But that is something that for us worked straight out of the box. We haven't needed to touch that at all. And then what you actually have is you're going to have a cache at multiple layers, right? So obviously there's cache at the server layer. The Edge has its own cache so that it's keeping everything really fast and upfront for those state activations. And then the SDKs are keeping a state for themselves even of what they've been pulling. So the idea is that for flags that are checked often, the check starts and stops right at that very close to the application layer, which makes it incredibly fast. And then if you haven't checked it recently, you'll pass through increasingly far back. And even that's okay as far as adulteration. Do you want to add to that, Ivar?
Yeah, I think just for clarification, I think it's worth pointing out that what Redis is basically used for is backup mechanism in case Edge needs to be reprovisioned or restarted, or you're scaling up more instances, and it cannot talk to the Unleash server at startup to do that initial synchronization with the Unleash API. It would always prefer to do that. But if it is unable to, for some reason or another, it could be some network disturbances. We all know the fallacies of distributed computing. You can never trust the network. Then having a close by Redis is more or less used as a backup for the initial state, and it will keep that up to date every time it detects changes from the upstream Unleash API. So it will keep the local Redis instance up to date, but obviously it should be local to the cluster or the deployment. But obviously, if you are doing horizontal scaling, you will probably have multiple Edge instances connecting to the same Redis instance, basically. Let's move on a bit. So let's just reading through the questions here. So I think we touched upon this question slightly, but maybe we should do a deeper dive. So we talked about you measuring kind of developer happiness, and I love that, by the way, like the developer experience. We see more and more companies having a strong focus on kind of how satisfied are the developers. If they're satisfied, usually equivalent that they're more efficient doing their job. But I think developer productivity is so important these days. Developers, they basically enable new business opportunities, and it would be nice if we could expand a bit more on that topic. What are important to you guys, in addition to measuring the happiness of the developers, in terms of how do you know, and not that the developers are not just happy, but they actually produce at a healthy rate, or kind of there is some measurable impact on their work, basically. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's been a popular topic lately. It's important fundamentally. The first principle of this is to kind of remember Goodhart's law. Any measure that becomes a target ceases to become a good measure. So one of the most important things is be really careful with how you are going to intentionally or otherwise, and it's the unintentional stuff that bites you, gamify developer productivity measurements. So keep that in mind, but ask how we do it. We like the DORA metrics. We think that they are predictive and correlated with business outcomes, which is important. And so we look at DORA metrics broadly across our organization. We, of course, at a pod by pod and team by team level, are looking also at OKR delivery and things like that. But there's two things about these that are important. If you think about how you measure anything, you can measure the effort, the output, the outcome, or the impact. So when we look at things like customer loyalty, supplier loyalty, revenue, those are impacts. And they are fundamentally what matters most. But they come at the end. By the time you know whether you have succeeded or failed, it's too late to change it. If we look at things like effort comes at the very beginning. We can tweak it moment by moment, let alone day by day. But the problem is effort has a terrible signal to noise ratio. And so what you end up with is almost no predictability. So while you can change everything, you don't know if you're making changes that will increase the likelihood of those good impacts. So anchoring at the outcome level, again, effort, output, outcome, impact. If you anchor at the outcome level, which is what OKRs do, it's what epics are typically used for, however you brand those, that's the right place to anchor. And then sprint by sprint, what you want to do is look at what are the things that are predictive of us achieving those outcomes, which themselves are likely to produce the impacts we're after. And so that's where we get a little deeper. We can look at all kinds of metrics, whether that's, the PR rates, how long it's taking to do code reviews, and all that kind of stuff. But just again, be careful that's where weird gamification will settle in. One of the main outcomes that we look for, though, is again back to those DORA metrics, our deploy frequency, and between that and our MTTR, which is also a DORA metric, that's where Unleashed has had the most impact.
It's fantastic. It's music to my ear. So we are getting to the end here, and I just wanted to make sure that if people are burning in with a question, please put it into the chat right now so we can make sure to cover them. And let's just give it a few moments for people to do that. And other than that, I think I just wanted to thank you for sharing your experience. It's always really exciting to meet customers and have them present their view of what Unleashed does to them. It's very inspiring for us to keep pushing and keep taking Unleashed to the next level, basically.
Yeah.
So
and things goes to one of the things I've enjoyed. Some solutions that we have in our system are simply that they're a solution. We bought it. It works or it doesn't. That's kind of the end. One of the things that I've enjoyed from the Unleashed team is how well you've partnered with us when we have questions or needs that we're frustrated with or experiencing. Your team has been very quick to jump in and help us with any and all of that. And that's helped us accelerate both our use and our adoption of the system and make it the system it needs to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's been fantastic for us as well. You have given us a lot of valuable insights on how to improve the performance, things that has been struggles for sure. And we take all those learnings and incorporate that into Unleash and obviously make that available to everybody using Unleash. So it's kind of a win-win scenario for us as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to come in any more questions. I think with that we can end here. So thank you so much everybody for joining in to this webinar. And yes, it is recorded and you will receive, if you sign up for this webinar, you will receive it to your inbox, the recording afterwards. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.